The wind howled a mournful tune across the barren plains, whistling through the cracks in Jedediah's small, lonely cabin. Jed, a man etched with the harsh lines of the West, sat on his porch, gazing at the dusty horizon. His weathered hands, calloused from years of toil, nervously fidgeted with a worn leather pouch. Inside lay a faded photograph, a picture of Anya, the woman he hoped would soon be his wife. He wasn't a man for words or grand gestures, Jed. Loneliness had been his only companion since his parents died of influenza. But he yearned for someone to share his life with, someone to warm the cold nights and help tame the unforgiving land. That's why he sent for a mail-order bride. Beside him sat Buster, a scruffy, mixed-breed dog with eyes as intelligent as any man's. Buster was more than just a pet, he was Jed's confidant, his shadow, his family. He understood Jed's moods with a simple glance, and his loyalty was unwavering. Buster rested his head on Jed's knee, sensing his master's anticipation. Jed scratched behind Buster's ears. "She should be here soon, boy," he murmured, his voice rough but tinged with hope. "Think you'll like her, Buster? She wrote that she loves dogs." Buster wagged his tail tentatively, his ears perked. He trusted Jed's judgment, but there was a flicker of unease in his brown eyes. He couldn't explain it, but something felt different. The wind carried a faint scent, unfamiliar and unsettling, that made the hair on his back stand on end. He whined softly, a low rumble in his chest. Jed, lost in his thoughts of Anya, didn't notice. Meanwhile, miles away, Anya bounced along in the stagecoach, the relentless jostling making her stomach churn. Dust swirled around her, coating everything in a fine layer of grit. The other passengers, a gruff-looking prospector and a prim schoolteacher, offered her polite smiles, but Anya remained withdrawn, clutching a small, worn valise. She gazed out the window at the passing landscape, a blur of browns and yellows stretching towards the horizon. It was nothing like the green fields of her homeland. Fear gnawed at her. Had she made a mistake? Was she trading one form of misery for another? She pulled out a small, silver locket and opened it, revealing a tiny portrait of her younger sister. A wave of guilt washed over her. She was doing this for Lily, to provide her with a better life, free from the poverty and hardship they had always known. The stagecoach lurched violently, throwing Anya against the side. She bit back a cry of pain. This journey was proving to be even more difficult than she had imagined. She wondered what Jed was like. His letters had been simple but kind. She hoped he was a good man, a man who would understand her past and offer her a fresh start. She closed her eyes, picturing Jed's face from the photograph. A sturdy, honest face. She clung to that image, a beacon of hope in the vast, uncertain wilderness. Little did she know, the man she was about to meet wasn't the only one whose measure she would have to face. A certain scruffy dog with intelligent eyes would also be watching, judging, and ultimately, deciding her fate. The relative calm of the stagecoach ride was shattered with the sudden crack of gunfire. Bandits. They emerged from the rocky outcroppings, their faces hidden behind bandanas, their weapons glinting menacingly in the harsh sunlight. "Everyone out." Now, their leader bellowed, his voice raspy and cruel. Panic erupted inside the stagecoach. The prospector fumbled for his own weapon, but he was quickly disarmed. The schoolteacher screamed, burying her face in her hands. Anya, paralyzed with fear, could only stare wide-eyed as the bandits ransacked the coach, grabbing valuables and terrorizing the passengers. During the chaos, one of the bandits, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, grabbed Anya's valise, ripping it from her grasp. She instinctively cried out, reaching for it, but he shoved her roughly aside. The force of the blow sent her tumbling out of the stagecoach and onto the hard, unforgiving ground. The stagecoach, now stripped bare, sped away, leaving Anya lying injured and alone in the dust. The bandits, satisfied with their haul, vanished back into the rocks, their laughter echoing in the sudden silence. Anya groaned, struggling to sit up. Her head throbbed, and her leg felt like it was on fire. She was stranded, miles from civilization, with no food, no water, and no hope of rescue. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. This was it. This was how she would die. A victim of the unforgiving West. She didn't see the pair of bright, intelligent eyes watching her from the distance, already moving to help. Back at Jed's farm, Buster's unease had grown into a frantic anxiety. He paced restlessly, whining and scratching at the door. Jed, busy preparing a meager welcome supper, tried to soothe him. "What's got into you, boy? You'll scare Anya when she gets here." But Buster wouldn't be calmed. The unsettling scent he detected earlier had intensified, now laced with the sharp tang of fear and the metallic odor of blood. He knew, with an instinct that ran deeper than words, that something was terribly wrong. He whined again, a long, mournful sound that tugged at Jed's heart. Jed finally stopped what he was doing and knelt down, looking Buster in the eye. "You think she's in trouble, boy?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Buster barked sharply, then turned and ran towards the open door, glancing back at Jed as if urging him to follow. Jed hesitated for a moment. He didn't want to leave the farm unattended, not when Anya was due to arrive. But the desperation in Buster's eyes was impossible to ignore. He grabbed his rifle and a canteen of water. "All right, boy," he said, his voice firm. "Let's go see what's the matter." Buster barked again, a joyful sound this time, and took off across the fields, his nose to the ground, following the faint, invisible trail of distress. He ran with a purpose, driven by an unwavering loyalty and a growing sense of urgency. He knew that somewhere out there, a woman was in trouble, and he was the only one who could help her. He just didn't yet know the full truth of who she was. The sun beat down mercilessly on Anya as she lay helpless on the ground. Vultures circled overhead, their shadows a grim reminder of her precarious situation. Dehydration gnawed at her throat, and the pain in her leg was excruciating. Just when she thought she couldn't endure another moment, she heard a sound, a faint but distinct bark in the distance. Hope flickered within her. Could it be? Was someone coming? The barking grew louder, closer, until a scruffy dog burst into view, running towards her with unwavering determination. It was Buster. She recognized him instantly from the photograph Jed had sent. He reached her side in a matter of seconds, panting heavily but his eyes filled with concern. He nudged her gently with his nose, whining softly. Anya reached out a trembling hand and stroked his fur. "Buster," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You came." He licked her face, as if to reassure her. Then, he began to circle her, sniffing the air, his ears perked. He was assessing the situation, determining the extent of her injuries and the surrounding danger. He barked sharply, then trotted a short distance away, turning back to look at her, as if urging her to follow. Anya tried to stand, but a searing pain shot through her leg, and she cried out. Buster immediately returned to her side, nudging her again, his eyes filled with understanding. He seemed to know she couldn't walk. He then settled down beside her, positioning himself between her and the circling vultures, his low growl a clear warning. He wouldn't let them near her. He would protect her, even if it cost him his life. For now, Anya was safe, under the watchful gaze of a loyal and courageous dog. But Jed was still far behind. Hours passed. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. Anya drifted in and out of consciousness, her body weak and dehydrated. Buster remained steadfast by her side, occasionally nudging her to keep her awake and licking her face to offer comfort. Finally, as darkness descended, Buster perked up his ears. He barked excitedly, his tail wagging furiously. He could hear the sound of approaching footsteps. Jed! Anya strained her eyes and saw him in the distance, running towards them, his face etched with worry. He reached them in a matter of moments, dropping to his knees beside Anya. "Anya! Oh, Anya, what happened?" he exclaimed, his voice filled with concern. He gently examined her injuries, his touch surprisingly tender. Buster nudged Jed's hand, as if to say, "She needs water." Jed quickly retrieved the canteen from his pack and helped Anya to drink. The cool water revived her, and she managed a weak smile. "Bandits," she whispered. "They attacked the stagecoach." Jed's face hardened with anger. "Those low-down skunks." "Don't you worry, Anya. You're safe now." He carefully lifted her into his arms, wincing at her pain. "Buster, lead the way home." And so, with Jed carrying Anya and Buster leading the way, they began the long trek back to the farm. Anya leaned against Jed, grateful for his strength and warmth. She looked at Buster trotting confidently ahead, his tail held high. She had never met a dog so brave and loyal. She felt a surge of gratitude towards him. He had saved her life. She only hoped she could prove worthy of his trust. Little did she know, that trust was conditional. Back at the farm, Jed settled Anya into his small but clean bedroom. He tended to her wounds with gentle care, his brow furrowed with concern. He made her a cup of herbal tea and sat beside her, watching over her as she slept. The next few days passed in a quiet rhythm. Jed did his chores, while Anya rested and recovered. She spent much of her time with Buster, who seemed to have appointed himself her personal bodyguard. He followed her everywhere, his tail wagging whenever she spoke to him. Anya, in turn, showered Buster with affection. She brushed his fur, fed him scraps from her meals, and told him stories about her life back home. She genuinely appreciated his loyalty and kindness. She believed she had found a true friend in this scruffy, four-legged companion. Jed was overjoyed to see Anya settling in so well. He had never seen his dog so happy, and he believed that Anya was the answer to his prayers. He started to make plans for their future, dreaming of a family and a life filled with love and laughter. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, Buster remained vigilant. He noticed subtle things that Jed, blinded by his affection for Anya, overlooked. Small inconsistencies in her stories, a flicker of something cold in her eyes when she thought no one was watching, and a strange possessiveness towards Jed's land. The unsettling scent that had first alerted him to danger lingered, growing stronger with each passing day. Buster knew, deep in his canine heart, that something was not right. He just couldn't quite put his paw on it yet. One afternoon, Buster was dozing in the sun near the barn when he saw Anya emerge, carrying a small burlap sack. She glanced around furtively, as if making sure she wasn't being watched, then headed towards the chicken coop. Buster watched with growing suspicion. Anya had always been gentle with the chickens, even offering them scraps from her plate. But today, her movements were different, hurried and secretive. He crept closer, his senses on high alert. He saw Anya sprinkle something from the sack into the chicken's feed. The chickens pecked at it eagerly, seemingly unaware of any danger. A few minutes later, one of the chickens began to convulse, its body twitching violently. Then, it fell to the ground, lifeless. The other chickens scattered in panic. Buster growled, a low rumble in his chest. He knew instinctively that Anya had poisoned the chicken. But why? Later that evening, as Jed admired a newly built fence, Anya questioned him intently about the boundaries of his property. She pressed him about the value of the land, and the potential for future development. Jed, ever trusting, answered her questions without hesitation. As Anya spoke, Buster noticed a subtle shift in her demeanor. The gentle, grateful woman he had come to know was replaced by something colder, harder, more calculating. He saw a glimpse of the woman who had been involved in the stagecoach robbery. That night, Buster lay awake, restless and uneasy. He couldn't shake the feeling that Anya was not who she seemed. He knew he had to find out the truth, before it was too late. He had to protect Jed, even if it meant betraying the woman he had once saved. The next morning, Buster decided to follow Anya. She claimed she was going for a walk, but Buster sensed a different purpose in her stride. She walked towards the rocky hills, the same direction the stagecoach had been traveling when it was attacked. As they neared the hills, a familiar scent filled Buster's nostrils, the scent of the bandits. He stopped abruptly, his ears perked, his body tense. He remembered that scent from the day he found Anya injured. But this time, it was stronger, more concentrated. Suddenly, a memory flashed through Buster's mind, a vivid image of Anya talking to the bandit leader just before she was thrown from the stagecoach. He remembered the way they looked at each other, a knowing glance that betrayed their complicity. He remembered the scent of her perfume mingling with the leader's tobacco, a scent he had dismissed at the time. It all clicked into place. Anya wasn't a victim of the bandits, she was one of them. She had planned the whole thing, using Jed as a way to get her hands on his land. The poison, the questions about the property lines, it all pointed to one thing: she was going to betray Jed. A wave of anger surged through Buster. He had trusted her, protected her, even saved her life. And she had repaid his kindness with deceit and treachery. He knew what he had to do. He had to warn Jed, even if it meant revealing Anya's true nature and shattering Jed's heart. He turned and raced back towards the farm, his barks echoing through the hills, a desperate plea for help. Buster burst into the farmyard, barking frantically. Jed, who was chopping wood near the barn, looked up in surprise. "What is it, boy? What's wrong?" he asked, concerned by Buster's frantic behavior. Buster ran towards Jed, jumping up and down, nipping at his sleeves, trying to pull him towards the house. He barked incessantly, his eyes wide with urgency. Jed tried to calm him down, but Buster wouldn't be calmed. He ran towards the house again, barking at the door, then back to Jed, as if trying to explain something. "Easy, boy, easy," Jed said, trying to soothe him. "I can't understand you when you're like this." Buster then did something he had never done before. He bared his teeth and growled, a low, menacing sound directed towards the house. Jed was shocked. He had never seen Buster act so aggressively, especially not towards his home. "Buster! Stop it," he commanded, his voice firm. "What's gotten into you?" Buster whimpered, then ran to Jed and placed his head on his lap, looking up at him with pleading eyes. He whined softly, as if begging Jed to believe him. Jed sighed. He loved Buster dearly, but he couldn't understand what the dog was trying to tell him. He looked towards the house, where Anya was inside preparing supper. He couldn't imagine anything wrong. "It's just Anya, boy," he said, trying to reassure Buster. "She's a good woman. She wouldn't hurt us." But Buster wouldn't be convinced. He continued to growl and bark, his warnings falling on deaf ears. Jed, blinded by his feelings for Anya, dismissed Buster's instincts as mere canine confusion. He couldn't see the danger that was lurking right under his nose. He petted Buster absently, then went inside, leaving the loyal dog outside, his heart heavy with dread. He knew, with growing certainty, that Jed was in grave danger, and he was running out of time to save him. Inside the cabin, Anya smiled sweetly at Jed as he sat down at the table. She placed a steaming bowl of stew in front of him, the aroma filling the small room. "I made your favorite," she said, her voice soft and gentle. "Eat up, you must be starving." Jed smiled back, his heart filled with warmth. He reached for his spoon, completely oblivious to the danger that lurked in the seemingly innocent meal. Outside, Buster watched through the window, his eyes narrowed, his body tense. He could smell the stew, but something was different about it. There was a faint, acrid odor that made his nose wrinkle. It was the same scent he had detected on the poisoned chicken. He knew, with chilling certainty, that Anya had poisoned the stew. She was going to kill Jed. He had to act fast. He ran to the door and began to scratch and bark frantically, trying to get Jed's attention. "What's all that racket?" Anya asked, her voice sharper than usual. "It's just Buster," Jed replied, waving his hand dismissively. "He's probably just hungry." He took a bite of the stew, his eyes closing in satisfaction. This is delicious, Anya. You're a wonderful cook. Buster knew he was running out of time. He threw himself against the door with all his might, desperate to break it down and save Jed. Suddenly, he heard a crash from inside the cabin. Anya screamed. He knew something terrible was happening. He had to get inside, no matter what. He was Jed's only hope. Buster finally managed to break through the door, splintering the wood and bursting into the cabin. He saw Jed slumped over the table, clutching his throat, his face turning red. Anya stood over him, a look of pure hatred on her face, holding a heavy candlestick in her hand. She had clearly struck him after he started choking. Without hesitation, Buster leaped forward, knocking the candlestick out of Anya's hand. It clattered to the floor. He then jumped onto the table, knocking the bowl of poisoned stew to the ground, splattering its contents across the floor. Anya screamed again, a sound filled with rage and frustration. She lunged at Buster, trying to push him off the table, but he stood his ground, growling fiercely. Jed, coughing and gasping for air, managed to push himself away from the table. He looked at Anya with disbelief and horror. Anya! Why? He croaked, his voice barely audible. Anya's face twisted into a sneer. You fool, she spat. Did you really think I cared about you? All I wanted was your land. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small pistol. Now, you're going to sign over the deed, or I'll finish what I started. Buster knew he had to protect Jed, even if it meant facing a loaded gun. He leaped off the table and positioned himself between Anya and Jed, his teeth bared, ready to defend his master to the death. The fate of Jed's farm, and perhaps his life, hung in the balance, resting on the courage of a loyal dog. Anya, her face contorted with rage, pointed the pistol at Buster. Get out of the way, you mutt, she screamed. Buster didn't flinch. He stood his ground, his eyes fixed on Anya, his teeth bared in a snarl. He knew he was risking his life, but he couldn't let her hurt Jed. Jed, still coughing and weak, managed to stagger to his feet. He looked at Anya with a mixture of shock and heartbreak. I can't believe you would do this, Anya, he said, his voice filled with pain. I trusted you. Trust is for fools, Jedediah, Anya sneered. Now, are you going to sign over the deed, or am I going to have to kill you both? She took a step closer, her finger tightening on the trigger. Buster knew he had to act. He couldn't reason with Anya, she was too far gone. He had to use his instincts, his strength, his loyalty to protect Jed. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunged at Anya, knocking her off balance. The pistol flew out of her hand and landed on the floor. Anya stumbled backwards, tripping over a chair and falling to the ground. Buster stood over her, growling menacingly, preventing her from getting up. Jed, seeing his opportunity, grabbed the pistol and pointed it at Anya, his hand trembling. He didn't want to hurt her, but he couldn't let her escape. It's over, Anya, he said, his voice firm but filled with sadness. It's over. Anya looked up at him, her eyes filled with hatred. You'll regret this, Jedediah, she hissed. You'll regret ever crossing me. Anya, realizing she was defeated, saw an opportunity for escape. She kicked out at Buster, catching him off guard and sending him sprawling. She scrambled to her feet and made a dash for the door. Stop! Jed yelled, but Anya was too fast. She burst out of the cabin and into the darkness. Buster, get her! Jed commanded, his voice hoarse. Buster, recovering quickly, leaped to his feet and took off after Anya, his powerful legs eating up the ground. He was faster and more agile than Anya, and he quickly gained on her. Anya ran through the farmyard, desperately trying to reach the horses, hoping to escape on horseback. But Buster cut her off, blocking her path. She tried to dodge around him, but Buster was too quick. He circled her, his growls growing louder and more menacing. He was like a wolf, cornering his prey. Anya, realizing she was trapped, stopped running. She looked around, her eyes filled with desperation. She knew she couldn't outrun Buster. Just then, they heard the sound of approaching horses. It was the sheriff. Jed had managed to send a message to town, and the sheriff had arrived just in time. The sheriff and his deputies surrounded Anya, their guns drawn. There was nowhere left to run. "It's over, Anya," the sheriff said, his voice stern. "You're under arrest." Anya, defeated and humiliated, hung her head in shame. Her plan had failed, and she was going to pay the price. As the deputies led her away in handcuffs, she glared at Buster, her eyes filled with hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll get my revenge." But Buster just barked, a triumphant sound that echoed through the night. He knew he had done his duty. He had protected Jed, and he had brought a criminal to justice. As the sheriff's wagon rumbled away, carrying Anya to justice, Jed stood in the doorway of his cabin, his heart heavy with sorrow. He watched until the wagon disappeared over the horizon, a cloud of dust marking its passage. He turned and looked at Buster, who was sitting patiently by his side, his tail wagging tentatively. Jed knelt down and wrapped his arms around the dog, burying his face in his fur. "Oh, Buster," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You saved my life. You saved everything." He hugged Buster tightly, tears streaming down his face. He had been so blind, so foolish, to trust Anya. He had almost lost everything because of his loneliness and his desperate desire for companionship. He looked into Buster's eyes, seeing the unwavering loyalty and unconditional love that shone within them. He realized that he had been searching for something that had been right beside him all along. "I don't know what I would have done without you, boy," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "You're the best friend a man could ask for." He stood up and walked back into the cabin, Buster following close behind. The cabin felt empty and cold without Anya's presence, but it also felt safe, secure, and filled with the unwavering loyalty of his faithful companion. Jed knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that he wouldn't have to face it alone. He had Buster by his side, and that was all that mattered. He spent the rest of the night petting Buster, feeling grateful. The days that followed were filled with a quiet contentment that Jed had never known before. He spent more time with Buster, exploring the farm, hunting in the hills, and simply enjoying each other's company. He realized that he had been so focused on finding someone to share his life with that he had overlooked the true companion who had been by his side all along. Buster wasn't just a dog, he was his family, his confidant, his protector. He started to confide in Buster, sharing his hopes and dreams, his fears and anxieties. He knew that Buster couldn't understand his words, but he sensed that the dog understood his heart. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jed scratched behind Buster's ears. "You know, boy," he said, his voice filled with affection. "I think we're going to be all right. We don't need anyone else. We've got each other." Buster wagged his tail and rested his head on Jed's knee, his eyes filled with unwavering loyalty. He knew that Jed was right. They had faced danger and adversity together, and they had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. From that day forward, Jed and Buster's bond grew even stronger. They were inseparable, two souls connected by an unbreakable thread of love and loyalty. Jed had finally found true companionship, not in a mail-order bride, but in the heart of a scruffy, mixed-breed dog who had saved his life and shown him the true meaning of friendship. The end.